Okay, so are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, so have you ever found yourself thinking, if I'm so smart, why am I not, rolling in dough? We're going to unpack that age-old question today, taking a deep dive into this YouTube video by Damien Talks Money.
Yeah.
You ready for some thought-provoking stats and maybe even like a shift in perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me about Damien's video was that visual he uses right at the beginning, the pasta representing the distribution of global wealth.
Oh, yeah.
So simple, but it's so effective.
It really does make you pause.
Yeah.
He points out that, if each piece of pasta is a chunk of wealth, the bottom 50% of the entire world holds the same amount as a tiny little group, 10 to 20 individuals.
Right, and that just immediately challenges that assumption that we're all on a level playing field when it comes to building wealth.
Totally. Makes you wonder, can hard work and intelligence really explain that imbalance?
Mm-hmm.
And Damien brings up these examples too, like Albert Einstein.
Right.
Brilliant mind, but not exactly like a tycoon.
Not at all. And he even uses the case of William James Sidis. This guy was supposedly reading the New York Times when he was 18 months old, went to Harvard at 11.
What?
Yeah, crazy, right? Estimated IQ pushing 300. But even with that level of intelligence, Sidis didn't achieve great financial success.
So there's got to be more to the story than just, you're smart, you work hard, you're going to be rich.
Absolutely. And this is where Damien digs into some really fascinating research, suggesting that luck might play a much larger role than we'd like to admit.
Okay.
He talks about this guy, Alexandre Pinault, who created these simulations to study how wealth is actually distributed.
Wait, simulations? Are we talking a video game for economics?
Kind of, yeah. These simulations were incredibly detailed, modeling people with a range of skills, work ethic, intelligence, social skills, all within a normal human range. But the point wasn't to predict individual outcomes. It was to look at how luck impacts the system as a whole.
Gotcha. So what happened in this virtual world?
Well, they ran these simulations thousands of times, and each time a familiar pattern emerged, just like in the real world. Around 80% of the wealth ended up concentrated in the hands of the top 20%.
Okay.
But here's the thing. There wasn't a clear correlation between any specific trait and landing in that top tier. It was largely determined by random lucky events.
That makes me think about all those what-if moments in life. What if I'd taken that other job? What if I'd invested in that stock? It makes you realize those seemingly random moments might have a bigger impact than we realize.
Yeah.
Right?
And Damien even uses his own story as an example. He launched his YouTube channel during this period where there was peak interest in investing in the UK.
Oh, interesting.
Hard work definitely played a part, but he readily acknowledges that fortunate timing was crucial for his channel taking off.
It's nice to hear someone acknowledge the role of chance, especially in a culture that really emphasizes individual effort above all else.
Yeah. He's not dismissing hard work, but he really stresses the importance of being ready to capitalize on those lucky breaks when they come knocking.
So how do we do that? How do we get ready for those lucky moments?
Well, that's where financial literacy comes in.
Here at MindMeld XL, we believe our best future will rely on a fusion of man and machine. Subscribe to the channel to follow our journey.
Damien argues that understanding basic financial concepts significantly increases your chances of seizing opportunities.
It's like having the right tools in your toolbox.
Right, exactly. If you're financially savvy, you're more likely to know how to invest well, manage your money effectively, and grow your wealth over time.
It's we always talk about compounding, but he really drives home the point that it's not about getting rich quick. It's those consistent actions over time that lead to big gains, like planting a tree.
Yeah.
You've got to nurture it for years before you see those fruits.
Right. And speaking of long-term thinking, let's talk about something that might seem a little counterintuitive. Damien mentions a Swedish study that found that the top 1% of earners may actually be less intelligent than those just below them.
Whoa, hold on. How does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? It's not that intelligence is holding you back. It's more about risk tolerance. Think about some of the highest paying jobs, doctors, lawyers, engineers. These careers offer stability, high incomes, but they don't always lead to that extreme wealth we're talking about.
So the smartest people are kind of drawn to those safe, high-paying jobs.
Exactly. To reach that upper echelon of wealth, you often need to be an entrepreneur, someone willing to take a big swing on a new venture.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Someone already making a good income and a secure career, they might be less likely to gamble on entrepreneurship. They've got more to lose, right? Whereas someone making minimum wage, starting a business might feel like a necessity, not a risk. They have less to lose, potentially way more to gain.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Makes you wonder, Would you give up a comfortable, secure job for a riskier path with maybe greater rewards? That's a tough question.
It is.
Yeah.
And this leads to another interesting point Damien makes, the power of adjacent skills.
Oh, yeah. He talks about learning skills outside of your main area of expertise. He uses his YouTube channel as an example. His finance background actually helped him create engaging content.
Exactly. He calls it skill stacking, combining seemingly unrelated skills that complement each other.
It's like having a Swiss Army knife. The more tools you have, the more prepared you are.
Right. And that adaptability can be crucial in recognizing and seizing those lucky breaks when they do appear.
Makes me think, what's one adjacent skill I could start learning this year? Something that could just enhance my existing skill set in a way I hadn't even thought of.
That's a great question to ask yourself.
Right.
And as you start exploring those new skills, keep in mind the Dunning-Kruger effect, which Damien touches on as well.
Oh, yeah, Dunning-Kruger.
Yeah.
That's where early success in a skill can actually lead to overconfidence, which then dips as your true understanding grows.
Right, exactly. Damien relates this to his own experience as a YouTuber. His initial confidence allowed him to just start creating. But as his knowledge grew, he actually became more self-critical.
It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I can definitely relate to that. But his point is, don't let those feelings of self-doubt hold you back.
Right. He really encourages viewers to challenge those negative thought patterns and remind themselves that sometimes a lack of confidence can actually be a sign of higher competence.
So the more we know, the more we might question ourselves.
Here at MindMeld XL, we believe our best future will rely on a fusion of man and machine. Subscribe to the channel to follow our journey.
But that's not always a bad thing.
It just means you're engaging in deeper critical thinking,
Right.
developing a more nuanced understanding.
Makes sense. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one really simple but often overlooked point Damien makes. You need to actually want wealth for any of this to matter.
Yeah, that's such a good point. We kind of assume that everybody's chasing riches, but that's not always the case. Some people prioritize other things. Creative fulfillment, making a difference.
Right? Financial success is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's about figuring out what truly motivates you
Absolutely.
and aligning your actions with your goals.
Now that's a good note to end on for this part. Hold on to that thought, because in part 2, we're going to explore Damien's question. Are you more focused on being right or on being successful?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is, trust me, it is a good one.
So are you more focused on being right or on being successful?
That is a really interesting question. What do you think Damien's getting at there?
You know, I think it ties back to what we were just talking about, that whole idea of risk tolerance. Sometimes we get so caught up in needing to be right, needing to have all the answers, that we miss out on opportunities to take risks that could actually lead to success, even if those risks mean we might end up being wrong.
So it's kind of about like being willing to step outside of your comfort zone, even if you're not 100% sure about the outcome.
Exactly. Embracing the unknown. Being okay with not always having the quote-unquote right answer.
It feels like that goes against how we're often taught to think, though, especially about things like finance.
Yeah.
We want those formulas and guarantees.
Right, we crave certainty, but like we saw in those simulations, real life rarely works that way.
It's messy.
Totally. It's more about being adaptable, being open to new possibilities, even if they come with a little bit of uncertainty.
So how do we get better at that? At being comfortable with not knowing everything?
Well, I think it starts with humility, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, and then having the courage to keep learning and growing, even if it means making mistakes along the way.
Is that what Damien means by becoming a perpetual beginner?
Yes, exactly. It's about constantly challenging ourselves, challenging our assumptions, and being open to new information, new perspectives. You know, it's interesting. He talks about how one of the biggest differences he's noticed between YouTubers who find success and those who don't often isn't about talent. It's about having the confidence to just start creating and sharing your work, even if you're not completely sure of yourself.
Just putting yourself out there.
Yeah, just taking action, even if you don't feel 100% ready. Because in the process of doing, you learn and you improve.
So don't let that fear of being wrong paralyze you.
Exactly. The biggest obstacle isn't always a lack of intelligence or ability. It's a lack of confidence, a lack of action.
He's really open about his own struggles with this too,
Yeah.
right? Like how he used to scrap entire videos because of self-doubt.
Oh, yeah. He talks about spending weeks on something, only to trash it because he didn't think it was good enough.
That's gotta be tough.
It is. And he attributes a lot of that to perfectionism and imposter syndrome, which he says are actually pretty common among experts.
You know, it's funny. That makes me think about the Dunning-Kruger effect again. Early on, you might be overly confident because you don't know enough to realize what you don't know. But as you become more of an expert, you become more aware of the complexities, the nuances, and that can actually lead to more self-criticism.
It's almost like a natural part of the learning process.
Right.
The more we know, the more we realize we don't know.
And that can be humbling.
It can be. But Damien's point is, we shouldn't let those feelings of self-doubt completely hold us back.
Don't let it paralyze you.
Right. He encourages his viewers to really challenge those negative thought patterns and remind themselves that sometimes a lack of confidence can actually be a sign of higher competence.
Interesting. So the more we know, the more we might question ourselves. But that's not necessarily a bad thing.
It just means we're thinking more critically.
Okay.
We're developing a more nuanced understanding.
So it's about embracing that journey of continuous learning and growth,
Right.
rather than striving for this kind of elusive perfection.
Exactly. And recognizing that the willingness to make mistakes, to take risks, to keep learning, that's often what separates those who achieve success from those who stay stuck in their comfort zones.
It's inspiring to hear that because it means that anyone, regardless of their background or their current circumstances, really has the potential to achieve great things if they're willing to step outside of their comfort zone and embrace that learning process.
Absolutely. I really appreciate how Damien combines the insightful research with his personal experiences and then offers some really actionable advice. It makes it feel relatable.
Very approachable.
Definitely. He doesn't promise a get-rich-quick scheme or anything, but he gives you the tools and the mindset to start building your own path.
So start taking control.
Right. It's about taking control of your financial future rather than feeling powerless.
And he gives people concrete steps they can take.
Right.
Right. Like focusing on that financial literacy, identifying adjacent skills to learn, overcoming perfectionism.
Yeah. And even encouraging people to think about whether wealth is something they actually desire, because it's not a universal aspiration,
And not everyone wants to be rich.
Exactly. And there are many different ways to define success.
It's refreshing to hear someone talk about finances in a way that feels practical and inspiring at the same time.
For sure. I think Damien's video is a great example of how to take a really complex topic and make it accessible and engaging.
He even ends with that call to action,
He does.
encouraging viewers to check out his resources, start taking those first steps.
It's clear that he genuinely wants to help people.
And he gives them the tools to do it.
He does. So as we start to wrap things up here, what are some of the big takeaways we can apply to our own lives? What does Damien's message mean for us, the deep divers tuning in?
That's a great question.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the relationship between intelligence and wealth, it's far more nuanced than we often assume. It's not a simple equation.
It's not just be smart, work hard, get rich.
No, it's not that simple. Damien highlights that while intelligence and hard work are important, they're definitely not the only factors at play.
There's luck, timing, risk, tolerance mindset.
Yeah.
It's a whole mix of things.
Right, and he challenges us to think critically about the stories we tell ourselves about wealth and success. Are we clinging to that idea that if I just hustle harder, I'll make it? Or are we open to exploring other possibilities?
Possibilities like learning new skills, taking calculated risks, accepting that chance plays a role.
It's about being proactive, taking ownership of our financial futures instead of feeling like we're just at the mercy of outside forces.
And you mentioned this earlier, financial success isn't a one-size-fits-all concept either.
Absolutely. It looks different for everyone. It's about defining what financial well-being means for you.
And then taking those steps to achieve it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's about being a little less obsessed with being right. And a little bit more focused on taking action. Even if it means maybe making a few mistakes along the way.
Beautifully said. It's about embracing the whole journey with all its twists and turns.
It feels like we've been through a lot in this deep dive. So much to think about. As we wrap things up, though, what's the one thing you really hope listeners take away from this? What's that golden nugget you got from Damien's video?
You know what? For me, it's really that simple truth that the connection between intelligence and wealth, it's way more complex than we tend to think. It's not a straight line.
It's not just be smart, work hard, boom, you're rich.
No, it's so much more than that. Damien really points out all these other factors: financial literacy, risk tolerance, being able to learn and adapt, even just luck. Those things can be just as important as being intelligent.
I love that he makes financial literacy a key point. It's like he's saying understanding money, that's a superpower.
It is, though.
Right.
That knowledge gives you the power to make good decisions, manage your money well, and you're more likely to be able to grab those lucky breaks when they pop up.
It's not about becoming a millionaire overnight either. It's about feeling secure with your finances, having that peace of mind.
Exactly. It's about having the freedom to make choices that align with your goals and your values.
One thing that really stuck with me is how Damien tells us to think about those stories we create in our heads, about success and wealth. So easy to fall into that, if I just work my butt off, I'll make it mindset.
That hustle mentality.
Yeah. But sometimes we need to look at things differently. Explore new ways of thinking.
Like what?
Well, like you were saying, learning new skills, taking some
Yeah.
risks, accepting that luck is a part of it all.
And being proactive, right? Taking control of our finances, not feeling like everything is totally out of our hands.
You mentioned this before too. It's not like there's one path to financial success that works for everyone.
Definitely not. What works for one person might be a total disaster for someone else. It's about figuring out what financial well-being even means to you.
That's powerful stuff. And sometimes it's about stepping out of that comfort zone, taking a risk, and being okay with not knowing everything.
Remember that study from Sweden? It showed that the people who are super wealthy, they're often the ones who are comfortable with uncertainty, taking those big leaps.
That hit home for me. It's about being okay with not knowing what's going to happen, being ready to learn and change as you go.
Damien says, embrace being a perpetual beginner.
It's easy to get stuck in self-doubt, especially when you're learning something new or trying things you've never done before. But what Damien says is, those unsure feelings can actually be a good thing. They mean you're growing, pushing past your limits.
It's all about growth.
And remember the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you first start out with something new, you might be overconfident because you don't know what you don't know. But then as you learn more, you start to really see how much there is to know. You might even question yourself.
Happens all the time. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize there's even more to learn.
Exactly. But don't let that stop you. Look at it as a good sign. It means you're on the right path. You're getting a deeper understanding. And that's going to lead to you being better at whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. It's a journey. It's about learning, growing, changing all the time.
So as we finish up this deep dive, let's all try to be a little easier on ourselves. Enjoy the process of learning. Celebrate each step we take towards our goals, whatever those goals are.
And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Absolutely. If you're ready to take your own financial journey to that next level, I highly recommend checking out Damien Talks Money. We'll include a link to his channel and all the resources he recommends in our show notes.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing those boundaries.
Here at MindMeld XL, we believe our best future will rely on a fusion of man and machine. Subscribe to the channel to follow our journey.